I'm listening to Kirk Minahan's podcast.
Sports and show business.
Kirk Minahan, who is apparently a derelict of some kind.
That is Kirk Minahan. No one more controversial right now in the sports talk world.
That's what I'm talking about. Sports!
Kirk Minahan, what kind of thug are you?
Yes, well, he is white hot right now.
The head. I also want to say something about Kirk Minahan because I like him.
Kirk is like a sports genius who everyone hates.
No, we'll do it live. Fuck it.
Okay, so this is totally, Mike, I'm leaving this up to you today.
All right.
All right. So, Danny, we're back for another Quantum Kirk. The intro that we talked about last time does appear again on this episode. I think, Danny, you had questions of when it finally goes away. So let's start off at the top. We're reviewing our the 4th of July week episode. It was brought up on the show. I found out about it. Like, honestly, let's give him a shout out. Phil McCooch tweeted it, was like, this is the anniversary of Moroso leaving the voicemail to Kirk. I found it as a great episode. I remember being an awesome episode first listen. So I thought it was incorporated in the show this week. I thought it would be a great episode to listen to being 4th of July week. So, that's the one we re-listened to. Yep.
Big shout out to Mr. McCooch. That was great fandom. And once again, we're kind of looking at something about almost 4 years to the day after it originally happened. So.
Yeah, and we're not going to keep doing that where it's like the same date or whatever. This just happened to fall on it. And everyone who commented on the first episode, I did write down those episodes. So, guys, like, we're definitely, I mean, there's a lot to get through. So, keep leaving us suggestions and, me and Danny then talk about it and do it. So, Ned Snark, thank you. He left a suggestion. I wrote that down. So I am keeping a list of people who, DM me and whatever of different episodes to listen to. So first off, Danny, let's get into that fucking intro. I laugh now every time I hear it. It's funnier and funnier to me. What catches your eye, what caught me about this episode, is that it wasn't played until 6 minutes and 30 seconds into the episode. I want to know, so let's get into it. Cullinane, it was his first episode producing. So Steve went on his Italy vacation. This was the first episode in studio for Cullinane ever on this variation of the Kirk Minahan show. This is about 3 weeks after the debut. So Blind Mike, was now in the third chair there. I would love to know from Cullinane, maybe if he hears this, he can tweet it out. Why 6.5 minutes in does he drop the intro? After an ad read, Danny. It was after the first Getro Man read.
It was like a cold open and then a Getro Man. And then it hit me. And it surprised me again. It surprised me last time thinking, as we discussed before, I didn't realize it was on the first episode. I completely forgot about that. And then this time I wasn't even thinking about it when all of a sudden, shoving up to Boston.
Boom. Just pops up. Because they had like I said, 6 minutes in. They had a conversation. They had an ad read. They were going over things. And all of a sudden, Danny, you're right. It's like I was like, oh, man, did they already get rid of the open? Like, I wrote that down. Oh, this first episode with no open. And then, bang, here it comes.
And there it is.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah,
so
we'll definitely have to get some Cullinane input on that. Yeah, maybe some behind the music from Mr.
I can give you an insight. They actually have a whole episode where he calls Steve out for the intro. He's like, what the fuck is this? What is this nonsense? And I think that's the last episode. So we will get, I'm sure, at some point to that episode. But he does. He just puts the kibosh on it one day. Just squashes it. So there's
So definitely, we had done that. Thanks, John, for popping in. Yeah, we had done that.
From here on out, it's the perfect open for Quantum Kirk.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that definitely is going to be the open. I like that. Thank you, John, for doing that. The other thing that jumped out to me was they had done an episode the day before, Danny, and they talked about it. It was the Tommy Dreamer episode. And it's an episode that, I'll be honest with you, I wish I had never, I'd forgotten. I thought, I didn't like it. It's not my style of Kirk Minahan show. It was very mental health. Kirk was really into this point. I remember in the show, he was like, we're going to get into mental health stuff. We're going to do it. I'm very glad that he eventually went away from that. And, it's not part of the KMS, show content really anymore for the most part. I didn't like the interview. I thought Tommy Dreamer was just an absolute drip. It was a tough slog to listen to. So it was interesting to hear him talk about it because they had just released it on the feed the day before.
Well, I'd say that's one way to look at it, Dave. Although at the same time, maybe this was laying the groundwork for our friends at BetterHelp. You know, he was just setting that up for the eventual sponsorship.
For the sponsorship. Yeah, no, I do think, though Kirk said when he started the show, though, like I remember the first bunch of episodes, he was like, we're going to do mental health. We're going to get into that. And then I do remember a mark, maybe, I don't know how late into the show, where he's like, we're not doing that sort of stuff anymore. Like, he kind of got sick of people calling in and like, oh, I've had mental health problems. Like, he eventually is like, I don't give a fuck.
Well, I agree. I mean, it's become a natural flow throughout the show. It comes in and out as it needs to, and it's very real. You know, it's when people are, you know, different characters on the show, or different people in real life have, you know, had their moments, and that's when it's, you know, just like that's what makes the show so special. They talk about those real things. Just like later, we'll, you know, quick tease, we'll talk more about, you know, the criticism of Howard Stern. Just like the whole thing with Artie Lange never got actually brought up on the show. Things like that weren't discussed. You know, now when it gets brought up, it's for a reason, and it's not necessarily just to do it. I will say, I think some of this, though, and with the Tommy Dreamer interview, a little bit of that was still that transition from Enough About Me into KM.
Yes, 1,000%. That with Tommy Dreamer was Enough About Me episode.
Right.
I couldn't agree more, Danny.
He does an amazing job with, as we know, and if it had been anybody other than Kirk Minahan interviewing Tommy Dreamer, then it would have been really rough, you know. So
yeah.
But I appreciate it at the time for what it was, and looking back on it, you know, was sort of interesting because I had forgotten about that happening, especially the day before.
Me too, Danny.
Right away.
Yeah, agreed. I will say this, folks out there in Quantum Kirk world, we're not doing the Tommy Dreamer episode as a re-listen. We can, at least I won't. Danny might have to fly solo if you guys insist on that one.
Maybe if we look, what were the odds on us making it to episode 2? So look, we're already here. You know,
we already beat Menner's projections. Menner said we wouldn't make it to episode 2. So, you know,
right. Well, careful.
The little tyrant.
Let's not get canceled after this one already.
Yeah, exactly. So, a couple of things that caught my attention in the first 6 minutes of the episode, first few minutes. They mention a private Twitter chat. Okay. So this is before I'm like really into Twitter. I'm like I had an account, but I almost never used it. I started getting into Twitter because of Kirk Minahan show. That is like the main reason, because he would talk about Twitter, on Twitter this, on Twitter that. So I was like, all right, what the fuck is going on, on Twitter? So I started becoming more involved. They mentioned a private group chat. I'm guessing, is that the 14? Do you know the history of that? Am I someone out there?
Yeah, no, it isn't. No, it isn't. Here's a little history on the 14.
Okay. Thanks, John.
I was not cool enough.
Original private chat was like the show chat. So like Steve had a chat basically so that, you know, Steve Robinson could talk to MHB and all those guys, because those guys basically ran the social media accounts at the beginning. But then it devolved into this just haven for Steve from Providence to pull practical jokes. But the 14 was made to make fun of the private chat, but then became the private chat, and thus spinning us down this terrible private chat
path.
wheel.
Okay. Thank you, John. Because I did notice right in the first few minutes of the episode, Danny, they brought that up, and I was like, holy shit, Kirk was like in a fucking private chat with, you know, Minifans and whatnot. So I was kind of surprised to hear that I had forgotten about that. I thought it was just like a fan thing.
He said, I jumped in on it the other night and was chatting with the guys, and I didn't make it in the other night. I wonder what they were talking about. Yeah, just a little, but see, this comes and goes, though. You know, I think you could see this with the network. You know, where things ebb and flow, Kirk gets more involved, more interested in doing something like that, and then something happens, and he wants to sort of, you know, let things go back to the way they were. But then, once again, these kind of things make for interesting content, and the kind of stuff that was really behind the scenes in the radio world, which is more prevalent in the podcast arena. But still, a lot of podcasts don't delve into this, you know, interaction with fans, and if it happens, it doesn't get brought up on the show.
So great point, Danny. And you kind of transitioned me into my next point, which is the like MHB, Blind Mike, DEC, which we kind of brought up, and how like they're the original like Menners almost. Like DEC, MHB are the original like side content, like fan show. Kirk mentions their show actually, and it is funny how like now Menners is doing this with the network, and it's like we've evolved, but we've kind of doing the same. You know, it's funny, just different characters, I guess.
It's a great point, Daver. And I think I tried to keep track of how many times MHB got mentioned on this episode, and I lost track after about 15 or 16. I mean,
Same.
he was staying at Mike's house, having drinks with him. Cullinan was having a beer with him.
That's
how
him.
Moroso ended up, at lunch with them or whatever. I mean, they were a huge part of the show. Like John said, they, between him and DEC, they were running the social media. Kirk mentioned a couple, direct interactions he had with both MHB and DEC, and of course made fun of MHB for being fat. Just all these callbacks just, really brought back memories. So I'm looking forward to, on the KMS network here, the KMN, that Where Are They Now show. I mean, I can't wait to hear from MHB. He's going to come out of the woodwork at some point. The fact he stayed away this long is shocking to me.
So, Danny, there's honestly, I had a similar idea to that about a year ago when it was that whole thing where Cullinan never DM'd me back. I couldn't get in touch with anyone to do it. So good luck to I DM'd Acronym Guy. It's like, good luck. Like, it's a great idea because I would love to MHB, DEC, William Benenson. Like, I want to do a William Benenson episode with me and you. I loved that guy. Was hilarious. Like, I thought his first couple of KMS shows were extremely funny. A couple of my favorites, to be honest.
Oh, Benenson was great, although he pretty actively exited the world. I think he started getting nervous about getting in trouble and jobs and things like that. But yeah, he's fallen off the face of the earth as well. Even if we can't hear from him directly, I'd just be interested to know what the hell happened to the guy. And Moroso, for that matter.
Moroso's another one. Like, these are a bunch of names that, like, but I just don't know if these guys will appear on the show. I think it's a great idea. I hope Akron and I can, behind the scenes, pull it off. I had VD, great investigator, kind of helping me, trying to get in touch or send out flare signals to people. Because, I mean, I bet my life that these guys are still in the world under, like, a different fake, like, parody account and just kind of maybe lurking. There's no way they just, like, walk away. Totally.
You wouldn't think, but maybe. I go back and forth on that. Could they really have had, when these people were so interested in clout, could they really have gone this long without, at some point, slipping and letting their burner be known, or just to get back into things somehow? I have a hard time believing that, but I could be wrong. I believe somebody like a Benenson could easily just move on to the next thing.
Benenson, yes. MHB, DEC, like,
he's probably a librarian in Des Moines now,
It's something like that, or exactly. Good one, Danny. So yeah, and there was another callback that, like, I totally forgotten about too, which was MHB and Blind Mike did a show on YouTube, Trash Talk. Mm-hmm. So what I can't remember is if it was before Kirk's show that they were doing stuff, or was that another side content that they started doing after Kirk? But I actually used to enjoy them together. I used to think, like, those two, like, that's buddies. A good podcast. Yeah.
Well, Trash Talk dates back to that's what Mike did. That was his podcast with Entercom. Am I right on that, John? Do you remember that for sure? If that was the Entercom podcast that Mike did, and then eventually MHB got introduced to the whole Miniverse through that and into that whole network, I believe is how.
Yeah. So I'd like for everyone, when you're listening, if you can correct me and Danny in the comments, please do. We will take it. You guys did it a couple times last episode. So thank you. We're just throwing stuff out there and kind of going off of our memory. We're doing a little bit of research, but we're not.
Minimal research here. Yeah,
minimal research. Yeah. Minimal research.
We're mostly living off our wit and high intelligence here.
Oh boy, Danny.
I didn't even listen to the episode.
The other thing that I wanted to point out was John's gone. I want to talk about the voicemail. All right. So John, if you're ready with this, I do want to play this voicemail and react to it. This was the Get Roman ad. And I guess a fan's girlfriend left this voicemail. So I'd like to play this for everybody. And then, Danny, I just got a couple of things on it that I want to get into.
Because there are two pretty prominent voicemails in this episode. Of course, the Moroso ones are the one everybody talks about and knows about. But this other one, this caught my ears.
Blew my mind. It blew my mind. Yeah.
I brought in the mail the other night and noticed a discreet package with my boyfriend's name on it. After a few minutes of questioning, he told me that he purchased Roman swipes. He made it very clear that he did not buy them from me. Can you believe that he told me he bought them to support Kirk and the Kirk Minahan show? Well, after trying them out, I don't care who he bought them for. Our bedroom time has doubled thanks to Roman swipes. So thank you, Getro Man, and thank you, Kirk.
Well, there you go. I mean,
you don't need to say anything.
It doesn't get sweeter than that, does it?
To know, Minifans out there, Tim and Canton, anyone, historians, who is the psycho that wrote that down for their girlfriend to read into a voicemail, or sister or cousin, whoever that lady is? Because that was definitely gun to her head reading that word for word. When she goes, and he didn't buy them from me. It was like she was trying out as like a voice actress or something like that. I absolutely was. We need to find the person who put that poor girl up to that voicemail.
I mean, speak about where are they now content. I mean, that would be perfect. And the best part is after they totally play it off, between Kirk and Mike. Oh yeah, wow, what an organic voicemail. That's absolutely amazing.
It was so natural. Yeah,
this is great. And once again,
and I'm not saying, we're not saying that Kirk or Mike put someone up to it. We are not saying that.
No, we're saying that they got it and just played along with it as
just played along with it. Yeah. Yeah.
And by the way, just like the last episode we discussed, 2 Getro Man reads, and those are the 2 sponsors for the entire episode.
Yeah, I wonder if, do you even see that in podcasts anymore, where it's the same company with 2 different ad reads? It's actually, maybe Kirk can address that. Like, do they pay double? Were they paying double? I wonder how that actually works.
Basically, you pay for
interesting tidbit to find out if you would.
You could pay for basically
but I just found her.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you could pay for like a live read during the episode, at the beginning of the episode, or at the end of the episode. Like the beginning of the episode, think of like Joe Rogan, where they just throw stuff and you could 30-second over it. But the middle of the episode is where the money is, because randomly it just pops up and it's the live read, blah, blah, blah. So that's really what I assume. Roman was just paying a flat fee and they were just they're just filling slots with Roman, basically, because no one sold for the Kirk show at this time. It was bullshit, pretty much.
They were basically the featured sponsor at this point. Right?
Yeah. I think they were. So,
and it makes sense. And honestly, what I thought, and that's a great point by John, what I thought was interesting is that, both in this case, and there was another sponsor in the other, in the previous episode, the
movement watches.
Yeah. But interesting that still the Roman ones were 2 in a row, within 10 minutes of each other, because both Roman
10 minutes of each other.
Both Roman reads were before the Moroso voicemail even kicked in.
Yes. And
42.
Yeah. So what else caught you about like that voicemail? Like, I just picture this girl being like to this dude, like, oh, what the fuck? Like, you're really going to call and make me read this? Like, it out.
That in and of itself didn't surprise me in the full realm of the KMS world. Cause I could see that happening now, probably without an issue, calling in if you got that voicemail and somebody did it, and there's enough people now involved, and we've grown to this large group that you could see somebody be crazier shit's happened. The fact that it happened that early in the existence of the Kirk Minahan show is probably the part that got me, because it means we're only about a month in here still, right? And so the fact is, you had somebody was a big enough fan, got locked in with a sponsor, said, hey, I can make a name for myself, hey Sheila, read this, and the fact that this woman was like, yeah, sure, I'll, again,
and
we don't know.
He didn't buy them from me. He bought them for the Kirk Minahan show.
And I was mine was blown away.
Mine was blown away. He lasted double the time.
Dave, Dave, it sounds like you could be the next spokesperson here for.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So another thing. So let's talk about Dave's first production. This is Dave's first episode in studio. He talks about Steve leaving him a voicemail. Dave is angling for the job right away, Danny. Like, he's into it. He wants Steve's job. He's trying to trash talk Steve. Kirk kind of won't let him. Dave doesn't talk. I timed this. He does not say word 1 until 10 minutes into the episode. Quite a difference from today, folks. Okay. And only speaks when Kirk asks him a question. That is the first time he talked. Was that jarring for you, Danny?
Well, yes, but that was really to kick off. I mean, the comfort level rose after that. I mean, what I love is in this episode how they go back through that whole history, and back to the whole Dershowitz thing, which I'm sure we'll get more into.
Yes.
And just that evolution of the back and forth, and how Moroso even got involved, and then how Steve got involved, and how Ken Laird was in the running. I mean, there were just so many moving parts. Just that whole period in time, even as someone that followed it closely at the time, and now looking back on it, I still remember a lot about it. It's still confusing as hell as far as what happened when, exactly what order things happened in. So the fact is, Dave was, still trying to get comfortable and sort of get his footing. He definitely opened up a lot through the episode. And I made a note that all 3 of them, Kirk, Blind Mike, and Cullinane, all sounded pretty similar how they do now. Like, I think we talked about the first episode, not necessarily specifically audio quality, but the way they were talking. It was still like, instead of 1.5 speed, it was maybe at 1.25.
Kirk is still a little speedier than what he is now. I still found it to be a little faster.
If I just had to listen to that out of the blue and I knew nothing, I could maybe see that episode being 2021, ish. It didn't quite have, but it still had a little bit of a different feel. As far as Cullinane jumping in, you're right. I mean, he was kind of bashing Steve a little bit, but then he also, I even wrote it down. He made a quote. He quoted to Kirk, "Hey Kirk, when you told me about the Steve hire, I was like, wow, this is great." So he just went. He definitely did a little flip flopping there.
Yeah, a little. Well, I mean, the Cullinane flip flop. That's just what he is. Like, oh no, Steve's a nice guy. Yeah, Steve's great. I'm just saying, like, why would he text me that late? Well, Dave, I mean, he needed you to know what was going on. As soon as Kirk laid out, like, you're reaching here, he's like, no, yeah, you're right. It was already. Yeah. We're seeing what it is now. It's the Cullinane flip flop right away.
I was with Dave on the 12:30 a.m. text though, and I'm guilty of it sometimes. John can attest to this. Sometimes I don't, pay attention to what time it is when I'm texting somebody, but especially if it's someone for work. Because look, and most people now you can set your phone to do not disturb and that sort of thing. But even 4 years ago, that wasn't as common. So that would sometimes wake you up, and sometimes that could be a little annoying.
I'll say so. A couple other things that are obviously hugely different from what they are today is Dave didn't set the agenda. Kirk was not waiting for Dave to, Kirk going next. So if you're a new listener and you haven't listened to any of these old episodes, that is something that is hugely different. Is Kirk is driving the topics. They're literally. I'm not saying he doesn't drive the topics now. I'm not saying
what's next. What's next?
There's none of that. It's him saying, all right, this is what we're going to talk. This is what we're going to talk about next. So I found that interesting as well too. To not have Dave be the one that throwing out topics.
Yeah, no, this was definitely, like you said, I think Kirk still drives the show. But there's still this almost illusion of Dave kind of, at least Dave has, got to the point where he knows in general what Kirk's going to want to talk about and what he's not. And even when he still brings something up that he knows Kirk's not going to want to talk about, he still brings it up anyway. And then it still gets kicked back, or Kirk says, I want to talk about that. And then they still talk about it. So, there's still certainly that the driving force is, always been Kirk.
All right. So I wrote something down, and then this was, I don't know if you caught this, Danny, or if any of the listeners that re-listened caught it. It was jarring to me. It stood out to me. I actually went back and counted how many times he said it. Kirk, Seamus Minahan, did not say, he kept calling Steve Robinson, didn't call him Steve, didn't call him Big Steve. He called him Robinson when they were talking about him 4 times. Every time that they brought him up in the story about, getting the job with Moroso or whatever, him going on his vacation, he goes, yeah, Robinson texted me yesterday. Robinson, came in for the interview with blah, blah. And I just kept going, what the fuck is, I never, obviously don't remember the episode from 4 years ago. That jarred me, Danny. That absolutely shook me to my core. Because it's just, Steve isn't a Robinson. Like saying Steve, like I would never be like, oh, your last name, hey, what up, Sully? You're Sullivan, right? So that's an easy sort of thing. I just don't know. Calling Steve Robinson was very odd and off-putting to me.
Yeah, thanks for doxing me, but that's cool. No, I'm just kidding. No, I agree. That got at me as well. It just sounded so different from what we've heard.
Yeah.
And at the same time, but Cullinane has always been Cullinane. And a few times he said Dave, and I realized he was talking about a different Dave. He was talking about often he was talking about Dave. He was talking about Portnoy. And here and there he'll still say Dave, but for the most part, Cullinane's Cullinane. And then Steve is Steve or Big Steve or Steve Robinson altogether, like you said.
All together, yeah. Just the last name
one of those
weird.
Little things that's just changed, evolved over the years.
Yeah, I totally agreed. And I just remember being like, I wrote it down. I was like, all right, I got to go back and count how many times. I was like, does he even change? He never said Steve. It was always. So that's where it's almost like they really didn't know each other that much that well either. So I think it was also Kirk kind of getting, what do you call it?
Well, yeah, because, I mean, Steve took off for a three-week vacation / honeymoon, less than 3 weeks into the job. So
yeah, what a power move! What a fucking power
biggest
move!
Dick move I fucking love that move.
Yeah, what a power move!
Ball sack on the table, Steve.
Yeah.
And I have 3 weeks coming up. It's the first day. Okay, bye.
I mean, it made for great content for the first couple of weeks. But yeah, you show up like, hey, look, I'll be your producer, but just so you know, I'm taking a couple.
I'm out of here.
I actually did do something similar with a job where just a couple months in, I had a pre-planned family vacation, but even that was 2 weeks. And that was maybe 3 months into the job. So I told them, from day one, and they'll still grumble and groan, but in the end, it's like, all right, it is what it is. And my argument at the time was, look, wouldn't you rather have me go away for a little bit towards the beginning before, everything's kind of set in stone and we have this routine? Right now you're still used to me not being here, so it's going to be a lot easier for you to adapt and overcome to someone else. And enter Dave Cullinane again.
Yeah, but I do think Cullinane probably thought, I got 3 weeks. I got 3 weeks to wow this guy and tell this guy to, hey, hit the bricks. You don't need to come back here. We're good. I'll bet my life on it. But the other thing, though, you're right about is, like, the thing that was weird about Steve taking his vacation, though, is it was his honeymoon, but he'd been married a year already. True. So I know that's a thing now, but Kirk was even like, when he first told him, it was like, what do you mean? Like, you've been married a year. He's like, well, yeah, we just wanted to wait a year. Another Steve, like, fucking quirky sort of Robinson thing that I love.
Can't keep the man down.
Yeah. All right. So Danny, the last episode that we did on Quantum Kirk, no blind Mike. It was just Steve, just Kirk. So this is the first episode that we're reviewing with blind Mike. Now, hearing Mike today, okay, brought me back to re-listening, okay? Like, brought, what I used to think of him. I remember thinking when I heard this episode, this was the first episode where blind Mike was really good, that he actually felt comfortable. And it was the Moroso voicemail, which we are going to get into, is what solidified probably blind Mike to Kirk. If Kirk wants to jog his memory and, like, whatever. He was so good. He was, I mean, dare to say, as good as Kirk in their like, it was almost like a tennis match when they were talking about the tape. Like, they were volleying back and forth, and Dave just stayed out of it. And Mike was right there. Mike was like, stop the tape. It's stuff that Mike, up until this point, was not confident enough to do with Kirk. I remember thinking, like, oh, man, I don't know about this guy. He's better than MHP, but and this was the first episode where I remember, like, I'm a gearhead. Blind Mike killed it today. Your thoughts?
1,000%. I wrote down the same thing. I saw John giving the shout out. That stuck in my mind, I mean, from the beginning. And Mike, of course, said, I love this shit. This is the kind of stuff, when they did this on Opie and Anthony, when they did this on Stern, I love these breakdowns. I love going through and stopping the tape and making comments and making fun of people. And some of the power trips he pulled on Moroso, I mean, he was shitting all over the guy. For somebody who would talk about his lack of confidence, especially to this point before his break a couple of years ago, I mean, you would not have thought that at all. I mean, I couldn't be more in lockstep with you on this, Dave. I mean, I've always been a big gearhead. I always loved Blind Mike. I think he does. Go to blindmike.net and subscribe. Love all, why are you laughing? I think he's just a talented guy, but he needed some time and some ability to grow. But he was doing some professional things back then that I think maybe in other episodes he didn't do, because this was the content that really grabbed him. And I totally agree. I mean, Kirk, there were times where Kirk was almost, like you said, sort of deferring to Mike. There was one point where Kirk said something, and I actually didn't write down exactly what it was. And Mike didn't exactly disagree, but he kind of like went, oh, no, but what about this? And Kirk said, oh, yeah, okay, yeah. And just kind of went, threw it right back to Mike, and then Mike just kept powering through like a freight train.
Well, in the middle of it, Kirk even says, like, I think that you could teach a class on this voicemail, Mike. And Mike goes, yes, I could write a dissertation on this fucking voicemail. Like, he had listened to it so many times, he sent it to different people. And Danny, I'll agree with you. So I do remember now, like, now that stuff is coming back, re-listening, when Steve came back from his vacation, and the first few episodes back with Mike wasn't comfortable again. I remember people like clamoring for Cullinane because it was a looser, funnier show, because that's, Cullinane was a goof. Mike could goof on Cullinane. I don't think Mike felt comfortable goofing on Steve yet. Steve was kind of his boss. Mike still wasn't officially hired yet. But I remember thinking, like, Mike was better with Cullinane. And that's when a lot of the fans were like, hey, bring Cullinane, because Mike was better with Cullinane. And when they went into more political talk, Mike was just, out of his element when they would get into that stuff, to be totally honest.
Well, it doesn't interest him as much, And there were a couple, I mean, look, this episode at times bordered on politics. I mean, I thought the whole segment at the beginning about equal pay in women's soccer was interesting.
Yep.
And I know we're probably not going to
start. But hold on, Danny. Mike added nothing to that, though. I thought Mike was mediocre in that segment.
But he kept up the energy. I mean, because Kirk even called him out halfway through that. He's like, Mike just wants to get to the Moroso voicemail. I mean, that's all he cared about. So I think there was some element of that, but Mike held his own during that. And by the way, that was another one. We talked about this last episode, but one of those things that if you just had
we're still dealing with.
like pick a date when they talked about this for the first time, I wouldn't have said it makes sense knowing now when the World Cup was and everything. But the fact we're still talking about that, and of course this morning we hear that Megan Rapinoe's retiring. It's like we're still going through all this stuff. It's the same arguments over and over, round and round, 4 years later.
Well, it's funny. The Women's World Cup is about to start next week.
Yeah,
so it's every 4 years.
4 years later, right?
So, yeah, exactly. Yep. So interesting. So let's get into the voicemail. All right. Do we want to play the voicemail right now, John?
Let's do the voicemail.
It's voicemail time.
Okay.
Yeah,
so hold on really quick.
I will say this horizontal tease though has gone. We're still getting into the voicemail 12 minutes earlier than they did in the show.
That's
okay.
That's so
right. And I do want to point out for anyone who they're not listening to this, like, or if you haven't listened to this episode with us, go back and do it. But if not, or if you never listened before, please pay attention to this voicemail. It is the first episode that I truly was like laughing my ass off.
Yo, what's up, bro? Hey, listen, man. I just wanted to wish you a happy 4th of July. It's been a while since we hung out. And honestly, man, I'm starting to feel like you don't want me on the show. I mean, it kind of feels like it's not a joke anymore. It kind of feels real. It's like, once I was in on the joke, but now I feel like I'm outside. So I just want to see where you're at. Maybe you want to grab lunch, chill out. That's cool with me. So I think we could be so much more. That's all I'm saying. I mean, have you ever seen Behind the Candelabra? Because I feel like you're Michael Douglas, and I could be Matt Damon. 5 years that could be us, bro. That's all I'm saying. And also, Steve, he's all right. I don't like him. He kind of sucks. But can you shoot me his address? Just let me know where he's living at. That's all I need. So, and just let me know when you want to get lunch, let's say next week, because I'm going to be honest with you, if you don't go to lunch with me next week, I'm going to officially start to feel like you actually don't like me, or like you don't want me on the show, you don't want to hang out with me, which I think is like a joke. I think it's a joke now, but if you don't go out with me next week for lunch, then I'm going to feel like it's real. That's all I'm saying. So I miss you. Call me. Let's hang out. Doesn't have to be radio stuff. Let's go get a pizza. All right, Kirk. I'll talk to you later, buddy. Happy 4th.
All right. I don't even know. So there are two ways to look at this.
There's a lot.
There is a lot.
There's a lot, Mike. You're right. Okay, so Danny, I'm going to let you kick this off.
I have the video. If you want to talk over the video, I have the video set up so you could play it at any point, talk over it if you want.
No, because I think Kirk and Mike did that, so the whole point of this is to re-listen. Okay. Yeah, they did it, so I would encourage everyone to go back and re-listen to that. Thank you, John, though. That's awesome and super nice of you.
John. We are recapping the recap of the recap. So
yeah, so I don't want to do that. But I do want to talk about – so, Danny, I'm going to let you kick it off. What did you think of Moroso? What did you think when you first heard this voicemail? And like, what are your thoughts going through your mind?
I was so confused. I didn't know. I knew who this guy was, and I'd seen the dog food video. I knew a little bit of this background, but the fact, first off, I'm thinking, so this guy called Kirk. So if you look at the calendar, July 4th, 2019 was a Thursday night. Okay.
Yep.
So basically going into a long weekend, and then you've got this show happening on Tuesday. So it's been a couple days. So Kirk's been sitting on this voicemail for a couple days. And, I know we'll get into the where were we when this happened thing, but, I remember that Tuesday listening to this episode and thinking back, this guy's crazy. Who calls someone on the 4th of July? I don't call my friends on the 4th of July. I don't even really text people on the 4th. You just kind of hang out.
You don't say you don't say to people a happy 4th. Like you don't no.
You might throw a text out there or whatever. But here's the thing. 9 o'clock at night on the 4th of July, someone's either in bed or they're watching fireworks. There's nothing else happening then. The fact you're going to expect someone to answer the call. So I'm thinking he called at this time because he probably had a couple of wobbly pops, although he didn't, he didn't. That's true. John and I did once talk for about 3 hours on 4th of July. So I'm being a hypocrite once again. But he called up, he sounded relatively coherent, but I think he expected Kirk to not pick up. And then B, I could not figure out for the life of me, because before this breakdown of the episode and these guys injecting some more insight, is this guy joking or not?
Okay.
So that's the most amazing actor or he's just completely the least self-aware person in the history of the earth.
All right, Danny, that was a big talking point. There's camps in the KMS world that think Moroso was basically an evil fucking genius. That no one, like, he knew that Kirk was going to play the voicemail. Like, no one would be like, okay, bro, to Kirk Minahan if you've known Kirk Minahan, or to say the outlandish, let's go grab a pizza. Like, he definitely was like, he could have been a little buzzed. I am in the 4 years later, I'm in the camp of he knew what the fuck he was doing. Like, he hadn't produced. He saw Dave was coming in instead of him. All right. He definitely thought he was Steve Robinson's backup producer. When Kirk went to Dave, who he fired, all right, I think he's like, oh shit, like, I'm going to be out in the cold. This is a Hail Mary. This is my last chance. And he did it. And he sent the voicemail. I'm on the camp of evil genius Mark Moroso.
It's hard to argue with that because I just can't imagine someone just not getting it. Someone that even knew the first thing about Kirk Minahan. I remember how was it last week, that guy that came in and said howdy?
Yeah. Or the sandals. So maybe it is. Maybe people are crazy.
But those are little things. I mean, they're big things to Kirk. They're little things in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
I mean, to misread the situation, again, you're leaving a voicemail at the worst possible time. B, you're
also leaving a voicemail. When's the last time I haven't checked my voicemail in maybe 5 years? So that's psychopath move, leaving a voicemail.
Well, I'm sure there's nothing important. Maybe some bill collectors in there for you, David. But
whatever.
I think it is a weird move, to your point, unless you know it's going to be played. And again,
there it is.
Maybe the attitude on 2019 voicemail versus 2023. Maybe there's a little bit of a change there because you're right. Now at this point, even old people don't really leave voicemails anymore.
Nope.
But around then it was still kind of a back and forth type thing. Your mom might leave you a voicemail, but your buddy probably wouldn't.
A voicemail, the Kirk Minahan, dude. We're passing over the fact that you're leaving a dude that you worked for 20 minutes a voicemail who is Kirk, a crazy person and someone who is like will rip your skin off and like.
So, but John, that's my point. I think he knew he was going to do it, and it was the guy ate dog food the week before. So he
had to be a bad coke deep. Like this guy had to be hammered or drunk or something. Like he had to be impaired. To do that is crazy. I'm sorry.
So to anyone who doesn't know, all right, I do want to give you a backstory. About a week or two before, he dressed up in a dog suit and looked like a human dog. And he ate dog food. He claimed later that it was like, chili, homemade chili. It wasn't real dog food. So I don't know. So the guy's really good. Like he was willing to embarrass himself, John, a lot for the show. I'm telling you, he left that voicemail knowing Kirk would play it. I guarantee.
Now he's a bank teller or something, right?
It's still great.
He's gone the way of sausage. He's working at a bank or something. I mean, it's like the guy's completely out of the industry now. As far as
acronym guy, if you're watching or listening, Moroso's got to be your first get, and you got to ask him about the fucking voicemail.
Yeah, we gotta find this guy. It's unbelievable to me because you're right. As soon as you leave a voicemail, I mean that's physical evidence forever. It's almost in this case, it's almost worse than sending someone a text or writing something down. But which is interesting though, because you think about it, how many times has Kirk mentioned, oh, well, Portnoy says, say whatever you want on your podcast. This whole thing happened with the, not the Bill Cosby thing. What was now I'm totally forgetting the original Steve Robinson, K Marco feud. But the Donald Trump Jr. and
the blog. It was a blog on Barstool with Trump Jr.
Right, the Trump Jr. thing. So, this isn't writing. Like, this is totally not cool. Say whatever you want on your podcast. Obviously, you can take a podcast, you can cut it, you can clip it, you can put it online, you can transcribe it. There's a million ways to distribute it. For some reason, in Barstool's world, that's much more dangerous to have it written down than it is to speak it. But in real life, you leave a voicemail like that, especially these days with phones, you can save it forever, and you can email it around, text it, put it on the internet. You're done.
So the counter argument that people might come at me with is, let's get into the text. Kirk read about 10 texts from Moroso that he got as well in this episode, and they were nuts. They were creepy. They were very much like if you're on Twitter right now, where Sig texting Montante 20 times in a row with no response and constantly chirping him. Strange, weird. Like if I'm not responding, like we're now crossing the border. And Kirk said he had something like 19 messages where he never responded. And he actually started reading some of them. And they were also kind of crazy. So if you're on the camp of, like John is, I think John is in the camp of Moroso's a nut job or drinking every night. That is Exhibit A is definitely the text if you really listen to the episode.
That's fair. And, I'll call myself on this. I've been on that side of the text chain, and Montante particularly likes to call me out for it. But usually, mine aren't spread out. Mine are usually, I'm trying to tell a story. I'm trying to get everything across when, and I'm just not particularly succinct, as we can tell. But this doesn't continue over the chain of several days. You know, I get to day 5 and the texts are still blue. All right, I'm taking the hint there at some level. Or, you know, in Montante's case, he sends me, you know, a bunch of alarms emojis and whatnot. So, you know, it happens. It happens to the best of us. But yeah, at the same time, you're right. The combination of the two, I mean, did this guy really think that Kirk was going to say, yeah, let's go grab a pizza?
That's my favorite line. That's actually my favorite line. Doesn't have to be radio stuff is a legendary line. We could just go grab a pizza or something.
Let's talk about hey, Kirk.
Yeah, this is where Blind Mike, like you said, his confidence. He brings up there's a point where he said, and trust me, or like, let's go for pizza. Blind Mike brings up the fact that like there's a point right there where it sounds like this is about to be a threat. Like he's about to start threat. And like they go off on that point for like 45 minutes. And like Mike directed this voicemail basically. Like he drove Kirk around. And it was fucking great. Like this was when Blind Mike popped. I'm telling you, this was his pop.
Well, John agreed. And to
I
anyone,
have a question for you. Is this a Mount Rushmore episode?
So I have a top 4. This isn't there, but it's close.
I think it's one of mine. All right.
I think so. John, actually, that's a great point. When we're finally done, you know, whenever like Danny's like, hey, I do want to do like our last few episodes will be like our Mount Rushmores.
Yeah.
So I do kind of want to save that. So keep that locked in. Kids,
it's not there. It's up there.
That's
and part of it, and I think one theme that we'll find here on Quantum Kirk as we continue to review some of these top episodes, because these were, you know, often 2, 3, even 4 hour long portions, there were just parts that we didn't realize were mixed in. I mean, the Stern part we haven't even got to yet. That's another top segment. And the fact that it was in this same episode, you know, just you got to figure that in as well.
I used to say all the time to new Kirk listeners, one episode right now would be like 2 or 3 episodes. Like one episode right here, you could get 2 or 3 episodes out of it now. He would have 2 totally different shows in one show. That's how long the episodes
3 or
are.
even 4, definitely.
Yeah, and with no phone calls. Once again, so we still don't have phone calls. It's Colleen's first day. He does bring up that they could do it at some point, but we still don't have phone calls, and this is like 2.5 hours.
That's part of the reason for it, right? Because if this was a 2.5 hour episode now, you'd have 1 or 2 of those segments that were great, and then you'd have some phone calls that were either awesome or not. I'm one that always thinks the phone calls are entertaining, whether or not they're actually good. So I enjoy them, but it's definitely that part of the dynamic of the show has probably shifted more than anything.
I couldn't agree more, Danny. One of my crutches last episode, people told me is 1,000%. So I am doing my best, folks, to not use that crutch.
I say that too. Okay? So that probably, remember Cullen got called out for the 100%. And I actually caught myself saying that. So yeah, I'm sure I've got my verbal crutches. I think I couldn't agree more. We've both said a few times. So
I know that's gonna be this week's. I just don't know what else to do, folks. Like I'm trying. Okay.
I couldn't agree more.
1,000%. Danny, there you go. So let's get into the Stern stuff. So we'll bring John in on this. Is there anything else about the Moroso voicemail, Danny, that caught your eye though before we moved into the Stern stuff?
I think it's still just actually, here's what I was going to bring up. One thing this reminded me of, speaking of, you know, leaving evidence behind. This wasn't the first time that Kirk, you know, took a voicemail and absolutely ripped it apart. Of course, not the last. But the biggest one from the WEEI days, where one morning when John Meter Pearl called in sick, and he just sounds pathetic on this voicemail, and they played it on the air, I don't know how many times for years, and just shit all over Meter. Because he's like, oh, I'm calling it sick. And of course, this is not even close to the stratosphere of the Moroso voicemail.
Yeah.
Or remember, speaking of Stern, remember old RD voicemails of calling in sick? You'd be like, yeah, those are great too.
Well, even more so on a larger scale with those. But once again, it's like, I don't know what this guy expected to have happen, but maybe we'll find out now. I'd love to get the 4 year
voicemails are unlimited fun content for podcasts. Yes. Like you can make a whole series on voicemails. Like KFC Radio has done that. Like they do voicemail. Voicemails are just funny.
That's kind of how KFC podcasting started. Was originally just people leaving voicemails.
That was their segment, and then took off.
All right, so I want to get into the Howard Stern. I was a Howard Stern fan. I wasn't listen every day. I wasn't as much as Kirk, but I definitely was a Stern fan. I would listen as much as I could. It was back then, once you were done driving, that's it. Show was over for you once you got to your destination. And, I wasn't driving for 4 hours to work. So it was tough to I wasn't like Kirk. I wouldn't go back and try to re-listen or tape it or anything like that.
Or fill up your gas tank and drive around just to
drive around. No, I didn't do that. But I was a Stern fan. I know like the brush strokes of it. I do want to point out, so what we're about to get into is like you see the beginning of Blind Mike, like a Why Are You Laughing series. Like you saw it.
This is why I got in. So like I never listened to Stern back in the day. I never listened to Stern once, and I started listening to Why Are You Laughing, got me into listening to old Stern, got me listening into, like, I have listened to the whole Todd Packer collection. Like that's hours and hours of content, dude. Not the whole thing, but like pretty much I went over all the basics, RD, all that kind of stuff. I listen to all the Opie and Anthony now, like as much as you can. I'm saying all, but like, dude, I'm telling you, I've been doing this for like 2 hours because of Why Are You Laughing, dude? And this, like, I guess this was before when this episode of Kirk came out, before I listened to any of that stuff. And I didn't pay attention to it then. And then I re-listened to this part today, and I was like, oh my God, like I wish I knew what the fuck they were talking about then, because I do now. So like that's why the Pelican briefing and all this stuff is fucking great. Like hearing Stern get trashed by Kirk now means so much more to me, because I've listened to old Stern and I know how good he was, like what they did and all that bullshit. And now you just hear like the Pelican briefing, and he's just such a soft pussy. Soft.
If you listen to the episode, it's Stern being like, "Well, roll out the red carpet," and he literally means roll out the red carpet for celebrities. It was stuff that, like, if you listen to Stern back in the day, man, it's such a crazy turn. It'd be like Kirk. It really would just be like
the
Kirk,
Tommy Dreamer episode. I don't listen to Kirk interviewing any. I don't give a fuck about celebrities one bit, dude. I fucking actually hate celebrities. So I hate interview episodes. I just don't even listen to them, man. So like the Tommy Dreamer episode was before this one. I never listened to that episode once. Like you said, you didn't like it. I wouldn't even know, because I would never listen to it. I don't even know who Tommy Dreamer is, let alone what the fuck I care he said. Like, where I would rather this kind of an episode with a Moroso voicemail than some celebrity any day.
Yeah. So, but I do think that like it would be like Kirk though. Like Stern used to shit on celebrities. So it would really be like Kirk, like all of a sudden being like, "Hey, Shirley Liang, come in, sit down, let's have a nice conversation." That's literally what it would fucking be like. Like if he just was like, "You know what? I was wrong about Shirley this whole time. She's fucking cool. The Globe's pretty awesome. Brian McGorry, why don't you come in? We'll have a fucking snack. We'll eat some breakfast, and I'll do a softball interview." Like that's the best way I can describe it to. That's the best way I can describe it to Kirk Minahan fans.
Yeah, Cullinan's in charge of the catering. Justin goes and picks her up in his car.
Yeah.
You got Mike putting his coat down on the puddle so she can walk over it.
Just seeing that is like, it's sad, because like it's just what America does to a human being, and like what fame does to a human being.
Money.
It's sad to see, like, money does, and hot girls do to you. Like, and that's just sad to see when it's someone like Ray or Howard Stern who basically spoke against it. So it's pretty hypocritical, if you ask me.
And I could tell how mad Kirk was, because this was like I guarantee that Kirk, if you put his Mount Rushmore, I think it would be Bruce, Howard Stern, Larry Bird, Freddie Couples. If I'm wrong, if Kirk, tell me if I'm wrong on that Mount Rushmore. Let me know. I would guarantee that's like his Mount Rushmore. So that'd be like, and I think he felt like Stern turned his back on. Like
Stern turned his back on his whole audience. I mean, first of all, like he blatantly started doing it in the late 2010s and everything, when he just did one episode of fucking Moon Turn. So like, I mean, to anything, Stern is just showing how much of a hypocrite he is to his fans every day. If they're still hanging on at this point, it's wild. Like, I don't watch anything past the RD years. Like, I think Sal and Sal and Richard are idiots. I think they're so dumb. I don't think anything they do is funny. And that was basically the generation after RD Lange, as Danny called them earlier.
Yeah,
but RD, you also called her Rapino. Or you said it right. You said Rapino.
Yeah,
well,
it's a Rapino.
I producer notes.
In my defense,
Rapino.
You did have Cullinan call it the Miller Report and the Mueller Report. And
that was great. That was great. Yes, that was great.
It's just my homage.
All right, so Danny, let me kick it to you. Any thoughts on Kirk's reaction to Stern, and like what really caught your attention in that?
Well, John's right. I mean, Kirk was definitely disappointed. I mean, it's like seeing one of your childhood heroes behind the scenes, and Kirk already knew that this was happening with Stern, but then to get that Pelican Brief audio, I mean, it proved it. And I thought his point, probably what was the most poignant to me, was when he said, he's become now so out of touch, he doesn't realize everyone sitting in that audience, who I guarantee you all took that job because they adored Howard Stern.
Revered him,
right now. They hate him now because he's up there being the dickhead boss with the PowerPoint saying, we're going to do this and you're going to do that. Again, this should have been directed at Gary and maybe one other person. It's awful PowerPoint. And it's the PowerPoint they show you not to do. Like, this is not, you've got 15,000 words per slide. Like, no one's going to read that shit. Like, if you see the video of it, it's even more jarring. So
I loved Stern encouraging his staff to get burners and like literally create Twitter.
I mean, I would put that on my PowerPoint. I would put that on every PowerPoint I ever make. Make burners, kids.
Yeah, I mean, we've got plenty of
fans cannot make fun of that.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, absolutely. That's the first thing I ever do is make a burner.
Yeah, make a burner.
And to John, your
am
point,
a burner.
Yeah, you still are burner. To John's point about Blind Mike covering this with Craig on Why You're Laughing, that whole Pelican Brief, which I think is a Patreon special episode, so subscribe if you haven't already. But because I wasn't a huge Stern fan back in the day, I just didn't hate him. I knew of him, would hear about him here and there, watch Private Parts, that kind of thing. But it was watching that episode of Why Are You Laughing and then going back to this podcast episode. It just made
it seems like you and John did the same thing then.
Well,
so for anyone out there, for anyone out there,
Why Are You Laughing? I like it. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this on Kirk's network. More than Kirk's show. There you go. There's controversial.
All right. Danny got mad at me last week. All right, Danny.
Cut that. Oh, here comes Manners.
I'm kidding. I can't legally say that. I don't.
But no, so to anyone out there, do what these guys did. Do yourself a favor then to even accompany this episode even more. Go listen to that and then come back and listen to this as well too. You might even appreciate this segment even more from what these guys are saying, for sure.
There was one part I thought was interesting. Kirk gave Stern a hard time because Stern was only putting out 3 episodes a week.
Yeah.
Look at Danny. Wow, Danny.
Wow,
Danny, that is Mr.
Easy sneakers.
We're gonna take your honkism away, Danny. No more honk for you, buddy.
And you're canceled. Boop.
Yeah.
But he did follow that up with he's earned it. So,
Yeah.
Of course, that part's going to be cut.
I like less is more content. Surprisingly, is the opposite of what I am. But I like that they do it 3 episodes a week because it gives you a little day to breathe there, watch another episode.
And 5 wasn't
something
sustainable.
Else.
I mean, I loved that they were putting out. I mean,
that was a full-time job.
A titanic amount of content, for those first couple of years. No one could keep up with that. I mean,
whereas Stern has a whole fucking conglomerate of people where they better be putting 24. That's why when we criticize Kirk and say like the network should be 24 hours, like that's us believing in the Minifans so much that we think while Kirk's not doing a show, we think we could fill the rest of the time with bad content. And that's a good fucking pulse to have as a fandom. Trust me, that means you're fucking vowing for clout and shit like that. Then you're in a good fucking atmosphere of a fandom. So like those are the kind of things where like you can't criticize Kirk because he has no one that he pays. Howard Stern was paid $500 million. Like, yo, figure it out.
Right. with a staff of 70.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, it's insane to think that like, and Kirk and them used to do 5 days a week in 3 hours. That's hard to do, man. Doing an episode every day is hard.
With only a couple people. Yeah, complete.
To talk to Blind Mike for 3 hours a day for a week, that would be hard. And like, I love Blind Mike, but that's hard.
Talk to anybody. I mean,
to anybody, to yourself, let alone anybody.
Wife.
Yeah. Take my wife.
So I do want to point out, like, we're running up against it. We're kind of at the time of where I want to end it. So I have some final thoughts here at the end of the episode, Danny, and then I'll kick it off to you. A couple things that jumped out at me at the end. Okay. Cullinane made a rundown, a Google Doc that he mentioned, asked if Kirk and Mike looked at it. Mike said he did. Mike said, good job. Kirk said, absolutely fucking not. So right away, like, Cullinane definitely, he does a little bit of research. Everyone who questions Cullinane, he obviously comes in prepared with talking points, but I don't think Kirk got to any of them. I think they basically talked about 2 or 3 big things in this episode. That was it. So that caught my attention. Caught my attention of Kirk talking about, if you remember this, Danny, the fans were trying to get Kirk on Rogan before he debuted with Barstool. That was like a big Twitter thing of like whatever. And Kirk actually talked about it on this episode. So that I found interesting. He wasn't against it. And, now it's like, oh, I would never go on road. But like he was definitely like, oh, it's, organic if it happens, stuff like that. So I found that interesting. Anything jump out at you?
Well, I agree with you on the Rogan part. I did think that would be a fascinating podcast, of course, for us to listen to.
Agreed.
But yeah, the fact that it was that great point, that was still sort of an anachronism for me. I was thinking that was a discussion in a Twitter campaign that happened maybe 2 years later during COVID or something. The fact that it happened that early in the reign of KMS was pretty amazing. I think we hit on a lot of the big stuff. Hopefully we'll get to the where were we when this happened segment in just a moment. I'd like to, what I think I'm going to start doing is making a list though of random names that come up throughout each episode that are complete throwbacks. Sure. We've already mentioned about a dozen of them, but we had Kevin Spacey, Rob Bradford, Carson Mosley, Jan Broberg, Jeff Satellano, Sue O'Connell, Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah. So
Sue O'Connell already had her episode, and Kirk was talking of making her a semi-regular, like before Blind Mike was in every day, and that I think something happened with like something at Barstool, and she never responded to them again.
Yeah, she was one of these people that I think she went on the show, and I remember them having a really nice back and forth. It was one of those conversations that doesn't happen that much anymore, where you have somebody like Kirk, who's a libertarian, socially liberal, fiscally conservative, and then somebody like a Sue O'Connell, who's pretty much as far left as you can get, but was willing to get out there. But you know what? But when those people get on the podcast and have a back and forth, I love that. It's just so little of that happens anymore. Sue did a great job, but sure enough, her friends at GBH or the Globe or whatever came and said, "Hey, do you know who this guy is?" And the things he said, and next thing you know, it's persona non grata. It's unfortunate, but
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I don't know about Sue O'Connell's a third chair.
No, it's not a third chair, but it would have been fun. You could have been a phone a liberal. Hey, let's get somebody to defend this crazy thing. I mean, just what we talked about, what they talked about the other night, with Mass and Cass and, the city councilor crashing their car and just, kind of randomly not really apologizing, things like that, getting into politics, but also politics that people should give a shit about. But politics, whether you're left, right, up or down, is so far biased. It's like, let's get another perspective on this and let's get someone to actually speak up and defend it instead of turning off comments and not, having any sort of engagement. That's the part that just kills me about anything that happens these days. That's, so far leaning, especially on the left side, I think.
All right. A couple of things at the end of this episode that really caught my attention. Cullinane said Kirk turned down interviewing Jeff Foxworthy. I guess Cullinane had Foxworthy. I honestly, Kirk, why? I would have loved to fucking hear dude, come on. Kirk would have absolutely probably made fun of him. No. Like, I'm saying Kirk be like Kirk. Like, not be super nice to him. Like, a mean Kirk to Jeff Foxworthy and see how Foxworthy would have reacted would have been good content. So I would have liked to listen to that. And then they bring up, Danny, that they were doing an Adam Carolla interview.
Adam Carolla.
The next week. Okay, Danny, was that ever released? I don't ever remember Adam Carolla on.
I was going to ask you that.
Am I wrong?
I don't remember it either. The only Adam Carolla interaction I remember with anyone in that world was Jerry Callahan. Yeah,
Jerry Callahan. Yeah. So Tim and
whether that happened, Tim might know this.
Or Tim might know this, historian, or Kirk, or Dave, if you want to answer it, on a tweet. If you get to this far in the episode, does the interview never came out? Was it shitty? Did Adam bail on you?
So
I don't
they
even
just
remember
talked about this recently. It was in between, I guess. It was okay. It was in between Why Are You Laughing? Or not Why Are You Laughing? The one he did before All About Me and the Kirk Minahan show. I think this is what happened. It was in between that, and they were supposed to get Carolla, and then they didn't. But I think he did an interview with him before for the radio station podcast he did. Was that All About Me? Because they brought this up recently.
Yeah, I don't know. I missed.
They brought it up in this episode. It's like, hey, it's going to.
This one stumped me actually. When I was trying to come in here and have an answer for you, but I think they talked about it recently. Tim from Canton definitely will know this answer.
Yeah, Tim from Canton. So Tim and Canton, please, if you're listening, fucking get us the answer.
Okay? On this.
Go to the pro.
So, go to the pro. So yeah, I just found that interesting because I don't ever remember him on. So if he was on, that's an episode that is scrubbed from my brain.
I missed it too, and if John doesn't know it either, I bet it either didn't happen or it aired somewhere else. Maybe it aired on his feed. I don't know. We'll get the answer.
Yeah.
Report back
all right.
week.
Danny, we're at an hour. This is a little longer than what I like to do. Do you have any final thoughts? Yeah, you have any final thoughts?
Where were you July 4th, 29 or July 9th, 2019?
I don't remember where I was when this episode came out. I don't remember.
So I remember I was.
If you tell me to shitter again, Danny, I'm gonna fucking slap you.
Well, I'm sure I did take a shit that day, but I have a distinct memory of sitting in my driveway in Billerica watching the Bedford, Massachusetts fireworks, right over. Which actually we're going off probably right over Bedford Farms Ice Cream, which came up last week, which is way too close to my house, which does not help with my BMI. But if that alleged Big Minifan who owns Bedford Farms Ice Cream is interested in possibly sponsoring the Quantum Kirk podcast,
oh God, this is when I let you go off on a tangent. It's against my better instinct, Danny.
So
it really
good,
is.
Danny.
It really is against my better instinct, and every time you prove me correct. Like I don't know why I stand by and just let you.
Hey,
Did you just bring in like the Bedford Farms owner, fireworks, and a sponsorship all in one fucking fells?
What can I say?
Ah, God, Danny. God love
there's
you.
a reason
God.
we're the number one show on the network.
Jesus, Danny. And to everyone who gave us kind words, we're signing off shortly. Really appreciate it. It can only go down from here.
Yeah,
I did not like all the kind. Way too kind. We were expecting vitriol. I'm sure we will get it. I'm sure
Don't
this
worry.
episode probably sucks.
I'm on this show now. People will start fucking hating
That's
it.
true.
Don't worry.
Yeah. So
we're fucked.
Yeah, so we're fucked. But no, like got a lot of DMs, a lot of like tweets, kind words. So much appreciated. We're gonna do our best. We're not super content guys, but we're out here giving it a whirl, swinging the bat, as they say.
We do what we can.
Yeah. All right, Danny. Listen. So we're signing off. Next time we see you, you're gonna be a dad for the second time. So congrats, buddy. Hope everything goes well in the next. Yeah, I hope everything goes well in the next few days for you. I'm gonna leave you alone, and we'll check back in on you next week, and hopefully, you're cradling the baby, talking about Kirk Minihane.
I hope so. That's looking forward to it. Thank you, Dave, and thank you, John. Appreciate it. See you next time.
Yeah. And John, thank you so much for producing. Much appreciated. And guys, leave comments in the comments of future episodes you want us to review. I am writing all of your suggestions down for sure.
Yep.
I brought in the mail the other night and noticed a discreet package with my boyfriend's name on it. After a few minutes of questioning, he told me that he purchased Roman swipes. He made it very clear that he did not buy them for me. Can you believe that he told me he bought them to support Kirk and the Kirk Minihane show? Well, after trying them out, I don't care who he bought them for. Our bedroom time has doubled thanks to Roman swipes. So thank you, Getro Man, and thank you, Kirk.
Well, there you go. I mean,
you don't need to say anything.
Doesn't get sweeter than that, does it?